Well, hey there, you're on the internet. My prolonged absence is a story for another time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink, it's actually a cartridge. It's from the Pilot Mixables Series, where you get the 12 different colors, and then I'm pretty sure you can buy them, certain ones, in packages of specific colors. And, yeah, those are the colors. I've reviewed most of them, and the thing is, so this is a box I've recently got, so this one's new. However, over the years, because people know that I like fountain pens, and they themselves don't know much about fountain pens, a lot of times when they find stuff like this, they give it to me. So I've gotten probably 6 boxes of these over the years, and since I travel a lot and I love cartridges for travel, I used to keep them in this little thing. And so these have probably crossed the entire United States and the Atlantic, most of them at least 3 times, some as many as 5 or 6. So when in my previous test I was getting some very negative results, I thought it was about time to get some new ones and see if there was much of a difference. So this is one of the first tests that I did where I used one old cartridge, which I believe was this one. This is a Pilot Metropolitan. I put it in this pen. It's Pilot Metropolitan with a Japanese fine nib, so it is like razor thin. And I put it in this pen because I wanted to give it its, best chance. And since this is a very small nib, I thought, okay. But so that's the new one. I put the should be better cartridge in the should be better performing pen. Sorry. And I put the old one in the larger pen. Now this is a Pilot Parallel. It's one of, the calligraphy kind of pens. And so this is a fairly large nib. This is a 1.5. Now these cartridges, especially these mixable cartridges, were essentially designed to go along with these pens. Just something to put out there. So, yeah. We got orange today. It's an intense, bright, vibrant orange, that's for darn sure. Yeah, throughout the tests, I was actually comparing it to Noodler's Dragon's Napalm, but we'll get to that. So, let's look at some comparisons, shall we? So here's Pilot Mixable Orange, and here is KWZ Grapefruit, which is a little bit darker. And here's Diamine Sunset, which is a little bit closer, but has more shading. Here's Diamine Pumpkin, which is maybe a little closer, but also maybe a bit lighter. And here's Noodler's Summer Tanager. I keep wanting to call it Tangerine, but it's not. This one is lighter. However, these were the 4 that were closest. Throughout my test, I did compare it to Dragon's Napalm because my bottle of Dragon's Napalm is orange. It is not pink. It is very, very similar to this. However, these 4 were closer. Now, bear with me while I zoom in. Alright, so here are our chromatographies. Now, this one on the left is the one that you do the way you're supposed to, where you put the line of ink and essentially instantly drop it in the water. And what you can see is there is this intense, almost like highlighter, salmon kind of a pink. Then it goes up into the orange, but it's a very dark orange. And then it gets a bit lighter, and then we see these little hints of yellow up at the top. Now, what I do when I do these tests, I essentially just do like this across both, and then instantly dunk this, and then as soon as this chromatography is dry, which usually takes about 8 to 10 minutes, I then dunk this one. Now, as you can see, there is an outline around where that initial line was. You can see it's still a bright salmony pink, but there's sort of a dark pink outline, which is rather odd. And then, I don't know why, but is it just me, or does this seem a bit spotty? Like it's gathering differently. But anyways, regardless, pink, then orange, then more noticeable yellow separation up at the top, which I thought was interesting. Now, here's another point where I was comparing it to Dragon's Napalm. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Now, when I was doing these tests and I kept comparing it to Dragon's Napalm, I also decided to do some chromatography with Dragon's Napalm. Now, again, the ones with the little D's are the ones that I let dry. And I think you'll agree there are some distinct similarities Yeah, the difference here being Dragon's Napalm, the yellow travels a great bit more. But even, now if you know Dragon's Napalm, Noodler's Dragon's Napalm, it is partially UV fluorescent. And what fluoresces is actually this yellow up here at the top. And the same is true for this. The yellow in that fluoresces. Now, I've learned from past experience to stop trying to get black light on camera, so unfortunately I will not be showing you that, but it's true. The yellow through here, just like on Dragon's Napalm, fluoresces. Chemical tests. Now, at this point I was trying to see, I was trying to test far too many chemicals, and I actually ended up getting rid of a lot of them. But anyways, standard ones are still the same. Water. As you can see, it actually broke it up a fair bit. Got some of it moving. You can see the space, but it didn't get rid of all of it. And as you can see, it started to affect the paper. 1/3 bleach, again, didn't completely get rid of it. It got rid of some of it, but that pink underneath actually, in some ways, got darker and more pronounced, and that turned it pink on the other side of the paper as well. Now, acetone had no visible effect. Just really didn't. Ammonia pen flush really brought out the yellow, which I thought was a bit odd, but there you go. It also affected the paper. If you can see the texture of the paper here. It actually really started to affect it, and then it just pushed the ink out the back. So that was unfortunate. Denatured alcohol did absolutely nothing except turn it pink. And then the pink stuff came out the back, which was weird, but there you go. Hydrogen peroxide, again, you can see it really affected the texture of the paper. Come on, camera. If you can see the pulp in the paper. It got some of it moving, not all of it, and what's weird is like half of the pink moved and half of the yellow. And yeah, so anyways, there you go, chemical test. Paper test. Top down to density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, now, as I said at the beginning, the reason why I bought, and I actually bought 2 boxes of these, 2 new ones, but, just in case something weird was going on, and apparently not. So yeah, the new cartridges behave the same as the old cartridges that have been on planes far too many times. It's the same. Now, this is a 90 gram per square meter paper. It's extremely dense. I even made sure that I got the laid side and not the unlaid side. And still, we're gonna see problems right from the start. Come on, camera. Can you see how, you see the P in Pilot? You got feathering, you've got woolliness, you've got no shading whatsoever. It is a bright, intense, dark orange, but an orange. Yeah, we've got feathering, and we've got it all throughout. And if you look at this, this shading isn't really shading so much as it's woolification. If we bring this in as far as it'll let us, you can see the pulp of the paper, the texture of the pulp of the paper. And yeah, look, this ink, it's aggressive. It always has been, which is why I've never bought this ink for myself. Somebody bought it for me, and I didn't like it, but people kept giving it to me. And I don't know if I've told you the story about the time that I went to a pen shop in Rome and brought an empty Pilot cartridge. In fact, it was one of these. And the person behind the counter was fascinated with the little marble in the wide opening, and like he called someone over. Yeah, they don't have this in Rome, or they didn't for many years. And then about a year ago, I was in a stationery store in a Roman suburb, and they were selling Pilot parallel pens. So I don't know, maybe the market's expanding, but yeah, yeah, this ink is aggressive. There is a tiny bit of gold sheen, as I say down here. I don't know if I'll be able to get it on camera. Can you see? It's in. See where it's almost a little sparkly in the scrubbies? Yeah, so there's that. The Japanese fine took 10 seconds to dry. The 1.5 took 16, and you'll see just how much ink was moving in the smear, but that's because it very suddenly sinks into the paper. It'll sit on top, and it'll be like, and whatever makes it suddenly break, break through and sink in. Yeah, so most of this is the parallel. So this here is the parallel, this is the parallel, this is the Japanese fine, and I don't know if it'll come up on camera, but we actually have a couple spots right here. That's the Japanese fine. You can see through the paper. Yeah, it's an aggressive ink. Yeah, so we have woolliness, we have bleed in spots, we have feathering, we have no shading. It is very wet flowing in both of these pens. Granted, these are both Pilot pens, and this is a Pilot ink. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they were designed to work together, especially the parallel, because, these cartridges in particular. But yeah, it was flying out of that pen. It was a 7.5. It was just a matter of it being so aggressive to sink into the paper that, God. But yeah, we have some strange water resistance. As you can see, it's very feathery and spotty. And it did dye the page, and this fluoresces weirdly too. Just to let you know. Maybe I will try and get that on camera just because it's so odd looking. But yeah, so there's that. Next up is Fabriano. Now, I love Fabriano. Now, this is a Fabriano Eco Qua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. I really love this stuff. It tends to be able to handle papers that even Clairefontaine and Rhodia can kind of struggle with. However, as it says right here, even Fabriano's buckling under this aggressive ink. Which is true. Yeah, my magical Fabriano wasn't doing it this time. Just wasn't doing it. Now, again, the Japanese fine took 6 seconds to dry. The 1.5 parallel took 11, despite it being very wet. And that's because it just so aggressively sort of forces its way between the pores of the paper. Yeah, so we got feathering, and what's interesting is we actually have more noticeable feathering on that Japanese fine, which is the newer ink that's presumably not been put through air pressure nearly as much as the other one. But the other one does still have some. But mostly what we get there is woolliness. As you can see, there's essentially no shading, except here, and then I don't know if I'm going to be able to get... Oh, you can kind of see it in the top one. Just a little bit of that gold sheen, but yeah, at a glance, this almost looks like a lazy red, because it's such a dark orange. Yeah, but so there's that. It's a wildly intense color. Like, I don't know if this is going to come through on camera, but it's a very intense shade of orange. Now, this water test is fascinating. For some reason, the newer ink, which is this one, was smearing a lot more. If you can see that. There's pink all through there. So it dyed the page a lot more. This one less so, but as you can see, it's kind of there, but what remained is really not great. It's kind of patchy, it's woolly, it's feathery. So you would be able to tell that something was there, but it would not be pretty. And again, we have spots where it's coming out the other side, which is really not what you want to see. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. I feel like lots of people are familiar with this stuff. And yeah, even the ceramic coating on this didn't do it many favors. Yeah, Japanese fine took 10 seconds to dry. The parallel took 16. Here we get a slightly more noticeable sheen, at least in person. I don't know if it'll... There, oh, top scrubby. Oh, and the down ticks next to the 16, you can see some of the gold there. But yeah, that's pretty much the main upside on this. Come on. We got feathering again in the fine, which again is the newer ink. Like, yeah, there's essentially no shading. It's an intense color. There's woolliness. You can, like, in the scrubbies, you can see the texture of the paper, especially in that bottom scrubby. Yeah. You've got bleed, and again, not just in the scrubby, but in the writing as well. Again, mostly with the parallel, but not exclusively so. That's the Japanese fine right there. So is that. Yeah, so not great. Now, weirdly, this one really dyed the page. I hope that comes through and that the white balance isn't... Yeah, but also, well, the white balance is altering this. The writing here, especially where it's lightest, like so the bottom of this A, bottom of this T, bottom of this R, pretty much the whole S, and pretty much all of these letters are a highlighter pink color. And that's not coming through on camera, but that's something that's happening in real life. So yeah, that was unfortunate. My camera decided to spontaneously stop recording, so I'm going to start again at the beginning. Tomoe River, known for drawing out shading, sheen, dry times, and echo. And yeah, so this paper is blessed by dark sorcery and generally does not allow feathering or spread or bleed through because it has dark magic. And we got some bleed through. Now it's hard to tell because not a lot of it came out the back, but it actually ended up dotting the page below, which I could hardly believe. Since this is unlined paper, when I do this, I have a grid on the back, you know, like to guide where I should write, because otherwise I'd write like a weird bell curve. But yeah, so when I lifted it up at the end of the test, there were dots on the back where the scrubby had been. Now, admittedly, that's the scrubby, but it wasn't just the scrubby. It was here where it said seconds, or sec, I should say. Yeah, that was unfortunate. Now, yeah, okay, so maybe it's the cream quality of the paper, but here especially it looks more red. It essentially looks like, you know, like a stop sign red almost. Yeah, so we kind of lose that orange. Again, because of the way this paper works, it tends to really draw out dry times. So with a particularly wet ink like this, it's sitting on top of the page and it gives it time to evenly distribute. So, you know, like an O, you know, so the whole stroke is touching itself. It has time to settle evenly throughout it, so we really don't get much shading at all, except in the scrubby. And here, and usually this paper really brings out sheen, and it does a bit, but really not much. I say down that it did down on here, but now I like gold sheen, all emphatic like. But yeah, it's hard to find. So that's weird. But yeah, like I said, it draws out dry time. This is a very wet flowing ink. Japanese Fine took 20 seconds to dry. That 1.5 took 36, and just look at the sheer density of that color. You can barely see where the original ticks are. That's intense. And again, I hope the white balance isn't changing this too much. It is. This area right here is very pink. So where the top words are that was written in the Japanese Fine, that is very, very pink. Here, less so. It did release a lot of it, not much. I don't think it's a coincidence that the top words turned highlighter pink, and these actually turned like a muddy, pale maroon, and that these are darker, because you'll see the same, because the down ticks are the parallel, and the across is the fine, and the small dots obviously are the fine. And again, out the back, the line's drawn with the parallel. So yeah, weird stuff is going on here. This is a very strange ink. Now for the next 3 tests, I only used the Japanese Fine except to write the name. And again, the Japanese Fine is the one that contains the new cartridge. Now this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. This is complete trash. I can all but guarantee you have something at least a step up from this, if not several. Yeah, here it does look like a very dark, intense orange, or if you're not paying attention and glancing out the side of your eye, or you work with people who aren't terribly observant, it does kind of look like red. Again, no shading, but that's common for paper like this. It took 1 second to dry. There is a good amount of spread. If we look at the line width here on Tomoe River versus here, you can see just how much wider the line width got. Very woolly. Lots of feathering. Yeah, it's lots of bleed. Now, I want you to see just how dark these spots are. that doesn't just mean that they made it to the other side of the page. The ones that are absolutely the darkest rendered onto the page below. So that's unfortunate. And again, this is a Japanese font, but this ink is extremely wet flowing. Water test, it exploded. Looks like it's on fire. It spread, it feathered. This cursive, if you can barely call it that, is extremely hard to read. But yeah, I mean, something remains, and that fluoresces weirdly too. But it also got pushed out the back, and when I was mopping this up, you know, with a paper towel, I thought I dried it, and I lifted it up, and there was like an orange pool of little droplets of water that had essentially been squeezed out the back as I was patting it dry. So this ink is weird. Now, next up is Mead-like paper. So generally I use Mead paper, which is very common for school children, especially here in the United States. However, I ran out of Mead, and I got a simple spiral notebook from Staples, you know, where you get like a 10-pack for like $5 or something. And the paper behaved too well in a lot of cases, and so I had to go out and find some real Mead. Yeah, so here, you might be able to tell, we don't get nearly as much spread, and we don't get nearly as much feathering. We do get some, but not as much. Yep. We had 5 seconds to dry. So this ink rarely took that long on fancy premium paper, so that was an indicator that something was off. Yeah, we have no shading. We do have show through, and we have tiny dots of bleed, but mostly in the scrubby. So there's that. Now, yeah, again, this top bit, no, actually it's all of it. Yeah, no, okay, good. Because I would not have been able to explain that. I dyed the page, it's fairly pink, it pushed stuff out the back. It is very gone. It's woolly. It's feathery. Down in the water test, not great. Now lastly, we have Moleskine notebook paper. It is my nemesis. I hate it. It's terrible. Now imagine knowing what you know about my previous test with Moleskine and knowing what you know about this ink. And I want you to imagine how bad this is before I bring it in and really let you wallow in the details. Just soak it in. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. No, Japanese fine will not save you. No. No, it will not. Not here. 2.5 seconds to dry. And really, it's almost fascinating. It's like the you know, that weird human impulse not to look, or not to look away when you see a car wreck is imminent. Like, I don't understand. So woolly. Much feather. Why? Just hideous. Anyways, let's just look at this. Yeah. Japanese fine. Moleskine. Ugh. Anyways, just do I even need, it's a mess. It's terrible. Don't do it. Yeah, and talk about looking like it's on fire. That really looks like it's on fire. And screaming in pain. Because, holy moly. Yeah, I hate ending on Moleskine. Anyways, there you go. There's Pilot's Mixable Orange, an ink I've regrettably been familiar with for many years. Now, yeah, it's designed to work in these parallel pens. Overall, pretty much across the board, nearly all of these mixable inks have behaved in some way like this. Sometimes more extreme than others. And I've gotten comments being like, you know, from my review of like purple or blue-black, being like, mine doesn't do that. And I'm like, well, every single one of mine did. And so I got new stuff, and now I'm trying to retest it. But so far, we're getting this. So, yeah, maybe if you have a certain kind of paper that magically works with an ink like this, because, I mean, it is a bright, intense color. It is a deep, rich orange. It is wet flowing, which can be really good when you're trying to do, you know, calligraphy, because, I mean, is there anything more annoying when you're like halfway through a letter and suddenly it peters out? But yeah, it's a mess. Anyway, so there you go for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.